Millennials are America's largest, most educated generation in American history. A generation of ambition, education, and progress facing an uncertain reality. Born into an era of economic chaos, they face challenges far beyond what they were told to prepare for. They've had to rethink traditional milestones as they enter adulthood during global uncertainty. Their struggles mirror those of a generation before them, Japan's lost generation. The same story, different country, different time. America's lost generation goes beyond the numbers to capture the unique ways this generation is reshaping their future, in their own words. It's a story of real people, authentic challenges, and untold resilience. Explore the stories and reflections of America's Lost Generation by Cameron Cohen. Available now at soupllc.com.
Today on the Cameron Journal podcast, I'm joined by Julian Raven. He is a British-born, Spanish-raised American artist, author, and entrepreneur, and First Amendment activist who's currently locked in some sort of legal battle with the Smithsonian. We'll find out more. He is a truth seeker, an independent thinker. He's just the sort of person that we love to have on the show, and he has a working art studio in Elmira, New York. I might need to come visit. So welcome, Julian, to the Cameron Journal podcast.
Thank you, Cameron. Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to start off right from the beginning. Why don't you tell us a little about yourself and your book?
British born, in other words, born in London, raised in Marbella, Spain, where I grew up for half of my life, nearly. And then the second half of my life has been lived here in New York, in this beautiful state, although I have lived a season in Virginia as well. So this is where I am. I'm in my studio as we speak. And it's just a blessing to be in this country, to be an immigrant to the United States. And my book, Odious and Cerberus, An American Immigrant's Odyssey and His Free Speech, Legal War Against Smithsonian Corruption, tells that story in detail on multiple levels. It goes from being a serious, very serious story that I had to sort of sweeten by making it funny, by turning it into an allegory that runs parallel with the main narrative, so that as you get weighed down and bogged down in all of the historic and legal battle and jargon and documents, you then suddenly end up on a mountain climbing, adventuring, beautiful sunlight. And so you have this ebb and flow between the very heavy story and then the adventure that I was on. And it was a great adventure, full of heartache, full of disappointment, full of pain and suffering, full of redemption and moments of great ecstasy. And it is ongoing today as we speak.
Fun. All right. Well, one of the things I love about living in this particular region of the country is how many wonderful creative things that are happening around. Not that I always have time to go and do them and engage with them all, but
Sure.
I'm glad that they're around, that we didn't have a lot of that in Colorado where I grew up. And I moved to the West Coast to find it more. And when I moved to the East, I found that it's, art and creativity are falling off nearly every tree. So it's
well, you should go to Spain. It's unreal.
Yeah.
Really? Yep.
Yeah. So it's an interesting sort of thing. So why don't we start from the beginning of your story? And let's begin with how did your relationship with the Smithsonian begin? What was your first interaction with them?
Well, it goes back to 2016. And just for your listeners up front, so they know where I'm coming from today on my journey, I am a person who has become politically homeless. I am a follower of Jesus, and yet I am not a church person or a religious person, and I am not a Trump apologist. But this is my journey regarding and involving this portrait that I painted of Donald Trump. Being a New Yorker, I had come to know the name Donald Trump. I lived in New York City for 10 years in a town called Nyack on the Hudson River. And as a furniture designer and builder, that was my creative expression at the time. I would often travel to New York City, and you'd see his name on the, on a sign on West Side Highway. This next mile was cleaned by Trump, and that was a little sign. But then you'd look across; it was a massive sign. These buildings are being built by Trump, and Trump this and Trump that, and so it was very much a part of the culture of New York, and especially in New York City. So I was an immigrant. I was learning, and it was all new for me. In one memory I have, which is interesting, how even at a moment where I can remember New York State had a massive blackout, the whole state, and we were sitting in my wood shop. This is back in, it had to be sort of in the early 2000s, maybe 2004. And I can remember sitting with my employees, these workers that I had. We would just sit. We had nothing to do. No one could go anywhere. It was blacked out everywhere. And we got talking about Donald Trump. And this one person was sharing that story that's became like, folklore about him. His limo breaking down on the side of the road. And then this guy just pulls up in a pickup truck and he helps him change the tire. And then as he's about to leave, the tinted window rolls down and it's Donald Trump in there. And he's like, "Oh, thank you so much. Give me your address. I'd like to send your wife some flowers to say thank you." And he did that, but he also paid off the guy's mortgage on his home. So it was, these type of stories would sort of, float around in dialogue. That's a specific remembrance that I had. So I had this, this guy Trump, then he's on the TV with The Apprentice, and I used to watch that on and off. And I thought, I like, he's a no nonsense straight shooter, just firing people left, right, and center. And it was entertaining. And that's sort of the idea. But then it got more serious when I moved upstate. And in 2014, he had shown interest to run for governor. And the political climate in New York State economically is that, there are more businesses leaving the state than there are coming here. And myself and people that I knew were like, wow, this businessman, big name recognition, he could maybe really turn things around. He didn't get the support of the Republican committee. And so he dropped that effort, at that time. But then 2015 came, and the sort of iconic moment, I think it was June 15th, of him descending the escalator. And that's now this historic journey. Well, as an artist, and this story obviously is what I share in my book. I had this, very interesting connection with this moment that has changed my life and has impacted my life for the last 10 years. That was 2015, June of 2015. So the story obviously is what, I really delve into in my book, which has been a lifetime's work for me, along with this painting. But the moment when I was inspired to paint this painting of Donald Trump, I hid away in my studio where I am now. I was gone for like 2 months, nearly 6 weeks in this summer. There were 17 Republican candidates. There were 4 Democrat candidates running. And I get inspired and paint this massive 7 by 15 foot portrait and vision of this Make America Great idea that had just floated across the airwaves. And yet at the time, once I began to show it, the people that I knew were like, "Oh, I'd have to hold my nose to vote for this guy." Or, it was like, no, it was so poorly received because at that time, it was very early. They thought he was a joke candidate. They thought maybe this was a marketing ploy. And so, it was all viewed as very suspect what I had done. But I had painted this enormous painting. So, Cameron, that started me on this journey of what next. And then I go to the Iowa caucuses in January.
Oh no!
And a lot of things happened before. And I met Trump in Trump Tower. They took a copy, they hung it in their campaign headquarters. All this type of thing. So I go to Iowa, but the details of that, Cameron, they're remarkable. I come here as an immigrant. I was a political naive at the time. I really had no idea. I'd never voted at the time. I was a passionate artist. I'd been inspired. I had this portrait. I knew the Obama Hope portrait story by Shepard Fairey very well. And I was like, hey, you know what? This could be an opportunity. But I also knew that what I had created would also cause a lot of problem because the Obama Hope portrait became this celebrated iconic image. And I have a wonderful story that's attached to that as well. But I knew with the Trump portrait, and I was soon to experience the tremendous backlash and hostility of me schlepping this enormous portrait around in a giant truck with this copy of it posted on the side of the truck around Iowa in the Caucasus. And it was an amazing initiation into American politics and something I had no idea much about in the brutal winter of Iowa, where people were like gunslingers and on the plains of this like no man's land many times, where I nearly died once. It was a dramatic story that unfolded. It was an adventure, an American political citizen's adventure, a newborn citizen I'd just become in 2015. So that's, a little background, a little sketch of the journey that I had. And then the question regarding the Smithsonian, it's a little further forward than that.
Yeah, well, I think it's a nice setup to kind of what we did. So let's start kind of with the first part is so obviously the art gets some attention, and then the Smithsonian, I guess, then declines to display it.
That's right. This happens in December of 2016. And just before I get there, one of the major events on this journey was June of 2016, when I get a phone call from a gentleman by the name of Yossi Sergeant. I didn't know who he was, but I was soon to find out he was actually the patron and inspiration behind the Obama Hope portrait by Shepard Fairey. Shepard Fairey didn't come up with the idea. He was a graffiti artist on the streets of LA doing nothing. Yossi Sergeant met him at an art show, gave him $100 and said, find me this picture and make me a poster, this Hope poster. He had already commissioned a few years before another Obama big painting, which I ended up seeing in LA. But what became very interesting was that now I'm being invited to show my Trump painting at this time. This was huge for me. Artists were waiting for maybe a big break or some type of recognition. I'd had a lot of negative experiences already. So this was a big deal for me. And they were going to ship it out from New York to California. It's massive crate, 800 pounds. That's a whole another story, Cameron, where that all fell apart because they didn't listen to me properly. They kept saying, we're going to ship this. We ship art all over the country. This is great. And I said, yeah, but remember, my painting in its crate is 8 feet tall, 16 feet long, 12 inches deep, and it weighs 800 pounds. That's how much the crate weighs. It's all plywood. It's massive. Oh, no problem. No problem. Well, the day it was meant to be picked up, they canceled. The truck driver was halfway to picking up the painting. They called me up and say, well, the shipping company just got back to us. They said, it's going to be $5,000 more to ship your portrait. And we're not doing it. It's out of budget. And I'm like, man, after 6 weeks of going back and forth and telling you guys, now it was devastating. Well, what I do, it's this type of person I am. I unpacked the painting. I rented a Penske truck. I loaded the painting. I called up a buddy who'd always want to drive across the country. And I drove right across New York to LA. I went to Pasadena, California to the Politicon event of 2016. It was a great political, like Comic-Con, but politics. It was a big deal again for me. And I turn up there the day before it starts. Yossi Sergeant's like, I can't believe you made it. I said, I wasn't going to miss this for the world. I said, I'd carry this thing on my shoulder if I had to get it over here. So we did it 2 days and 9 hours. We drove all the way day and night to get there, and had an amazing participation in this. It was called The Art of Politics, with all of the nation's top political artists at the time. All of them. It was mainly an anti-Trump show. It's all anti-Trump. And he's like, listen, I can't stand Trump. He is an admitted. He says, I'm a hardcore leftist activist. He said it out loud. We got on great. So we're but different ideologies, but we got on great. It was a really positive experience in that way. He stuck my painting on the main wall of his show. It was a big deal. It was huge. In this conference center, they had put up these provisional 8-foot walls to display all the artwork. My painting is so big, it just sat on the floor attached to the wall, 8 feet tall. It was fun. It was fantastic. So that was a little background. So when Trump wins the election, I was like, and a lot more had happened. He wins. All the people that were mocking me and ridiculing me, and I had a lot of that in the media, the New York Times, they disdained what I was doing. They all went silent because Trump suddenly won. And now I'm stuck with this painting. Like, well, now what do I do? And I didn't know what to do, Cameron, to be honest. And I was like weeks, like in a bit of a slump. And I was like, what a downer. I'm like, he won, but my painting's sitting here and no one's calling. And it's just like, well, I pray and I say, Lord, help me. And I remember all these people I met along the journey from here to California. People would say to me, this needs to be in the Smithsonian. This needs to be in the Smithsonian. I'd hear it in Iowa, like you name it. And I didn't even know what the Smithsonian was. I'm a Brit. I'm from out of the. I'd heard about the Smithsonian. I thought of spaceships and rockets. And I'm like, I don't know what the Smithsonian is. So I start researching, and I find the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery. And then I'm like, oh my goodness, look at this. 2009, 2013, they received and displayed the Obama Hope portrait by Shepard Fairey as a tribute and celebratory display for the inauguration of this historic moment of this incredible election of this man who had been won, the first African American man, if they wanted to call him that, however they viewed it, this remarkable historic event, and they pay tribute to that in the arts with this portrait. And I was like, wow, this is great. So the Smithsonian shows portraits of candidates who win the election and as a tribute in the inauguration. And so I write this application. I get letters of support from all these politicians I'd met over the last year from all over New York State, upwards of 200,000 people, the representatives. They wrote these glowing, supportive letters, the art collectors and radio hosts. And so I had some, I was about 12 letters from congressmen and senators. It was really good. And I make this package, and then I'm like, what do I do now? How do I do this? And so I find the director. And the steps to getting to the director are in the book, and they're not as easy as I tell you now, because there was a whole battle to even get to the director that is in the book. It's another stage of like, to be honest with you, Cameron, I'm the type of person I sort of go through life, you're optimistic, you think people are just going to be straight up, and here I am. And if you don't like it, just be honest, and but the type of shenanigans that I dealt with were devastating to me, because each time I was like, oh my goodness, you got to be kidding. Anyway, fast forward to the application. I find the director's name, Kim Sayet. I write the email. I send on the application. And the next day, I'm the type of upfront person. I call her up. I find the phone number online. I'm like, can I speak to the director? It's the secretary. She's like, well, no, actually you can't. You're not going to be able to talk to the director of the National Portrait Gallery just by making a call. I'm calling. I sent this application. I want to know if there's something else I need to do. If there is, I want to, in good faith, let me know. Here's my number. And that was it. I didn't expect to hear back from anyone, maybe an email or something. Well, 15 minutes later, I'm sitting in my basement office in my home at the time, up in the woods in Elmira, New York. And there's the number on my phone, which is a 202 number from Washington, D.C. And I'm like, oh, is the Smithsonian maybe calling? And I answer it. And it's an Australian woman. And I was like, immediately, an Australian female voice. I was like, oh. And then it's, I'm the director of the National Portrait Gallery. This is Kim Sayet calling me. Yeah. So I get a call from the director of the National Portrait Gallery. And this, Cameron, is where my contact with the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery began.
Mm. All right. Well, I think one of the, so I don't usually do this during a recording, but I want people to see the picture. So we're going to jump over to your website real quick, and because I have the article here, and I'm going to briefly share my screen so we can look at the object. So Um, So there we are. I went over, you have a little WordPress site and I jumped onto it to just so that people have a reference of what we're seeing here. It's very interesting. It's very evocative. I don't think anything more American has been painted anywhere at any time. For certain. Um so yeah, I just wanted to kind of put that up for a moment. For if you're listening to this on audio only, please jump over to youtube.com/@Cameron Cowan to see the painting. We'll stop that and return to ourselves. But yes, all right, so that starts it. So then how I kind of when does things with the National Portrait Gallery start to fall apart, I suppose?
Right at that phone call.
Oh, we just started on the wrong situation, and it just goes downhill from here. Okay.
Oh my goodness.
Well,
I gotta tell you that the details it's like a movie. It really is.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think so. So let's not get into the weeds. Let's kind of get high level and let's set the scene for people. From the way I understand it, your chief complaint against them is that there's a free expression problem here, is my understanding. Is that how you would describe it?
Well, it's a lot more complex than that, meaning I didn't know what I was wading into when I got this phone call.
Mm.
The image, when you show the image, that painting is 7 by 15 feet. It's 102 square feet. The compressed image of it compresses in a very interesting way. To be honest with you, because it's such a large painting and portrait, as it shrinks down, it deteriorates. It is a remarkable painting in person. Any photograph of it is just like whatever. It's just, but it's a good representation of something. But this is 702 square feet. So anyway, the call happens. You got to hear the details. This is so specific because it then leads us into the issue of free expression, which is Kim Sayat, in a snooty Australian accent, starts to denigrate the work immediately. Oh, it's the portrait with the eagle and the American flag, in a very sort of negative. And I'm like, yeah. She says, well, it's too big, she says. And I reply, and to be honest with you, when I got the call and I heard her voice and she said she's the director of the Smithsonian, I was sitting down. I stood up. Out of respect for authority, this is the director of this national museum. I stood up in my office to say, "Oh my goodness, good morning." I was very much, at a posture of deference. You want to listen, you want to be the best you can be, and so I'm in this posture. And as she begins to speak, I'm like, man, this is real negative tone coming off what she's saying. I was like, well, okay, I'd heard a lot of that. I had a lot of grief with this thing. So she says it's too big, and I begin to then refute. And I say, well, what are the standards of size? It's too big. I mean, is there such a thing? And when is art too big? This is a national museum and telling me that my painting's too big. And it began to show this sort of arbitrary mind that she had. And then she jumps from that to the next thing. And she goes, well, it's not from life. And I said, when you paint a portrait from life, you're subject to sitting down and you paint them sitting in the room with them. That's how portraits are painted. Some. But I replied and said, well, hold on a second. The Obama Hope portrait from 2009 and 2013, which I knew very well, my work was hung with it in LA. So I had my work equal par with it by the very inspiration and patron of that work of art. So I know the story very well. I had Yossi Sergeant tell me the whole story that the media doesn't even tell of how that painting was created, et cetera, et cetera. So I respond and I said, well, the Obama Hope portrait wasn't painted from life. And she shoots back, yes, it was. And this is where the conversation goes off the rails. Her voice goes loud. She starts stamping her feet. I'm pushing back with facts. She's lying now. She's distorting reality. And I'm getting really disturbed, like, oh my goodness, what is she saying? This is a documented fact about this. It was a photograph. Shepard Fairey was actually sued by Manny Friedman, who was the photographer of the photo. He was an AP photographer. He took the photograph that he snatched off the internet and just photoshopped. And so Fairey was sued by Manny Friedman for copyright violation. He lost, and he was sentenced to 6 months of community service for destroying evidence, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the background. I knew the details, and now this woman is yelling now, raising her voice. Then she jumps from this one to the next one. She says it's too pro-Trump. And I'm like, it's too pro-Trump. I mean, how does a portrait not be pro the subject? I mean, the Obama portrait is totally pro-Obama. It's like, oh my goodness. This is the big clincher. This is the free expression tied in with the other objections. It's too political. And I'm like, too political? I said, the Obama Hope portrait was the campaign poster that Yossi Sergent used to help this man get elected. There's no doubt that the Obama Hope poster was part of the energy, the youth. There was amazing rallying image that was used to vote for the candidate Barack Obama with this image. That's the power of art. Great, wonderful. They did a great thing. They won in the arts with this image, and it was a powerful icon. It became a powerful icon. So now she's saying, well, yours is too pro-Trump. And I really, by now, I couldn't believe what I'm hearing. And so as I begin, obviously, to push back, she's getting more antsy, as this is it took 11 minutes. It was an argument for like 10 of the 11 minutes. And by the end of it, this is how it ends. Kim Sayat, the director of the National Portrait Gallery, she raises, she says, I'm the director of the National Portrait Gallery. Your application will go no further. You can appeal it all you want. Click. And she hangs up the phone on me. And I stunned. I was in a posture of deference. You're in submission to the director. You're honoring and wanting to respect her opinion. And yet she's like, I in my basement office, I write about it. It's the first chapter of my book. It's called Power and Abuse. And I was violated. I felt trampled. I was powerless. I felt like, what just happened? I'm stunned and speechless. It took me days before I could even share it with my wife. And that began then this whole issue. And so after about a week, 10 days, as I recovered, I'm like, well, what do I do? The inaugurations, that was December 1st, 2016. The inauguration's coming January 20th. I had plenty of time at the time now, as a week, 10 days lost. So again, I'm like, what I'm going to do? And I keep hearing in my head, oh, you can appeal it all you want. You can appeal it all you want. You can appeal it all you want. So I'm like, I'm going to appeal it. So what's the Smithsonian Institution, and who's the boss, and who runs the place? I start doing the research, and Google has helped me out, and I find the Board of Regents. I'm like, aha, the Board of Regents of the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery. And who's on the board? I'm like, oh my goodness, guess who's on the Board of Regents? Chief Justice John Roberts. He's the chancellor of the Smithsonian Institution. The vice president at the time was Joe Biden. He's the vice president. He's on the Board of Regents, 3 members of Congress, 3 members of the House, 9 members of the public, super duper famous, important celebrity, wealthy, successful people, 9 of them, and all of these politicians. And they form the Board of Regents. So I'm like, okay, Kim said, appeal it all you want. And I draft my appeal. I had written down what she did in that conversation about half an hour after it. I wrote some rough notes. I had learned in life just to write stuff down. I didn't record the conversation, which I could have, but didn't happen. But I wrote it down, and I draft this appeal, and I write the details, and I add all the letters of support that I got from all the New York State representatives, and I sent large prints rolled up in 17 packets. I carried them into the post office, all this big, huge bundle. They were big, thick manila envelopes, 17 of them, and these copy the portraits and all, big, there were prints of it and the whole thing. And I mail it off to all of the representatives on the Board of Regents, one by one. I didn't hear anything for about 10 days. This is now into December. I think it was probably around Christmas time, maybe just after. And I get a letter in the mail, Smithsonian letter. And I was like, oh, here's the response. And it's from a gentleman by the name of Dr. Richard Curran. No idea who he was. He wasn't on the Board of Regents. But here's Dr. Richard Curran. It was a very sparsely written letter. Basically says, it's copied in my book. You can read the original letter. It says, "Dear Mr. Raven, the Board of Regents," I think it might even say John Roberts, but the Board of Regents for sure, "handed me your letter," he says. Not appeal. He handed me your letter. And basically, he looked into everything that Kim Sayre did and said. He agreed with everything she said. Goodbye. And that's it. Letter is like one sentence, and that's it. And I'm like, oh, this is an appeal? This is an appeal to the Chief Justice of the United States, who is the Chancellor of the Smithsonian Board of Regents, and this is my appeal. This is a response to what I sent them, this application, this publicly supported application, this behavior of this woman. And I get a one-sentence reply that basically says he agreed with everything she did. Goodbye. And I went from having this black eye to like getting kicked right between the legs, it felt like, and I'm like in like tears. It's like, what in the world is going on? And so, stunned, I then begin to research how I can continue my appeal into the federal court.
Okay. I've got a couple questions. So I guess the first kind of interesting question is why did you decide to continue to pursue it? Because you said you were, well, yeah. So you did the director. She's like, no, go away, and the next guy up's like, oh no, and then you wanted to pursue it into court. Why did you decide to keep going with it?
I'm wired in such a way that when things, from a young child, I've always, I've always either built things or taken things apart to see how they work, and I have to square the things that I dismantle. As a young kid, I didn't always put them back together, which is the case. But as you grow older, you got better at that. But the point was to try to fathom out how things work, and then to square the way that they work and why it works. And so when I approached this institution with all of this support, and I got this type of treatment, and based on the things that she said, one of the things I didn't say, the last thing before she did the hanging up thing, she goes, "Oh, it's no good." It was like a final blow.
Yeah.
Everything she said was arbitrary. And so it didn't line up, especially, Cameron, when I began to study the National Portrait Gallery. I found the original documents from the establishment of the Portrait Gallery. This is my research. And I found the original purpose for the National Portrait Gallery. And I found the criteria for portraiture acceptance in the National Portrait Gallery. And she violated everything. She trampled on the very standards for portraiture acceptance in the National Portrait Gallery. And this is where my journey today is so fascinating, because the American people, by and large, and I've spoken to a lot of people in the last 10 years, but mainly 8 years in the litigation, nobody has a clue about the Smithsonian Institution. Nobody has a clue what it is. I have documents for 150 years that support this. It's the Smithsonian enigma. I mean, I write about it all in the book. This is part of the issue of the speech that you brought up, the question about free speech, because it leads to the main question that I didn't look for this. I stumbled upon it by what I was doing. Did you see that movie, Erin Brockovich? Yes. Remember that with Julia Roberts? I just saw it like 6 months ago. A great film. I had no idea what it was. I'd never sort of was like, I just saw that and I was, I'm going to watch it, see what it is. Oh, what a great movie. But it really ministered to me in the sense that the story, and it's a true story. She's that woman who basically ends up working in a law firm pushing papers because of whatever she went through. And she was placed in front of reading this material. And the way that she was wired, she was the one that could see this series of facts. And she's like, something's not adding up here. Something's wrong here. And I was researching now furiously the Smithsonian. I find the rules, the laws, the standards, and I'm like, something's not adding up here. Something's not making sense to my mind that's trying to square this all away. So that question about why I pursued it, now I had to pursue it for vindication. I wanted my painting displayed because I'm like, if Shepard Fairey has his paintings displayed and it's a political portrait, I have equal standing to have mine displayed, unless you give me valid reasons why it shouldn't be, that align with the standards of portraiture acceptance at the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery. It specifically says in there that the purpose of the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery is different than all other museums, it says. In that it is not a museum or a gallery, because most people that despise Trump or despise the image, they mock it, they ridicule it. People, art is art. People love it, they hate it. The people that hate it, they say the Smithsonian should never have even considered that. That's a horrible painting. It's terrible. It's bad. It's no good. Like she said, her opinion was valid. Well, that criteria, it says in black and white, has no bearing on the acceptance of portraits at the National Portrait Gallery. In other words, artistic merit or the prominence of the artist are not to be considered. If you look at the record of portraits of Donald Trump in the National Portrait Gallery, there's about 5 of them now. But at that time, I think there were 4. There was 2 dot matrix printout pictures from like the 80s. And there was 1 small, looked like a pen and ink sketch on a napkin of this caricature of Trump as Icarus with wings made out of dollar bills in flames as he's falling from the sky, representing the time when one of his big economic implosions happened. He went bankrupt. And so those 3 images, and then there was a photograph of him throwing an apple in the air from like the New York realtor days when Trump was the realtor tycoon. These are the 4 images that existed. So when you look at those, you see that it has nothing to do with the artistic merit, but it has everything to do with the historicity of the individual. And it says that the portrait gallery is about individuals in America who have impacted the culture and history of the United States. It's basically the only reason for that gallery. So important people that have had an impact. And that's why the Trump pictures all reflected certain times in his journey as a very well-known American citizen. What she did to me, another trampling of the rights of not just mine, of the American people, was I forced the issue and they rejected my painting and they hung the photograph from him being in the realtor days. It's like this. And it's like, well, listen, the will of James Smithson, the Smithsonian Institution, is a institution it's a private charity, Cameron. It's a charity founded by an Englishman by the name of James Smithson. He gave his fortune from England to the United States. He never came to America. And the United States, the government, especially Congress, accepted the responsibility as merely trustee to establish the Smithsonian Institution. It's a private trust. It was originally funded by private money, and that's the way it should be. So this whole issue then now of giving this museum, which the will said was for the increase and diffusion of knowledge among men. That's a very short will. It was like a 1 sentence. When Kim Sayed had the opportunity to celebrate historically this historic event, whether you love or hate the guy, it was a historic event, a guy who never ran for office, never was elected. He got up, he stood up, and he won. You deprive the historical record of the United States. You deprive in the arts of a painting that was the most recognized, the first painting, the first political painting of Donald Trump. I was the first. It's all documented. 2015 summer, not the first portrait of Trump, the first political portrait, and it painted Trump as president. It was a prescient, prophetic image that he would win. All of those details that American people who were supportive of Trump could have rejoiced in the arts at that inauguration on January 20th, 2017, they were deprived of. And so all of these things weigh into then the desire for, obviously, for righteousness in the sense of make the record straight and make this stand on itself as a true, honest, and good faith effort that was cast aside because of political animus. Kim Sayed hated Trump. She was one of these people that was poisoned by his election. And on January the 21st, the day after he was inaugurated, she was marching in the anti-Trump march in Washington, D.C., the Women's March, posting selfies to the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery Twitter page, smiling at the anti-Trump march. I mean, she already displayed her animus. And said, listen, if you want to be like that in the public, in the private, and that's fine. But if you're going to work for these institutions, you need to be fair. You need to be neutral. And so all of these violations then build up towards the critical issue, which you asked about, which is free speech. The question that remains unanswered today in the courts, in Congress, even the Smithsonian, is, do American citizens have First Amendment guaranteed, constitutionally protected free speech rights? Because I was denied my free speech rights in the Smithsonian. Shepard Fairey and his art and his politics and his viewpoint was permitted and celebrated. My art, my politics, my viewpoint was cast aside arbitrarily by somebody who clearly evidenced that she was a hostile anti-Trump person by posting the evidence on the Twitter page of the Smithsonian, for goodness sake. So that gives you a little background there of then the impetus that is driving me and continues to today, that by the grace of God, this day will come when vindication will come. And the last month has been incredible what's gone on in this story.
Yes. Well, well, yes. I mean, the Miss Say who you've been battling with has been sent packing. And we're recording this in early July. So there'll be more developments by the time this goes out. I don't know how much interaction you've had with the American artistic establishment. And then we got to go because we're coming up to the hour. But this has been a fascinating story. How much kind of interaction you've had with the American artistic establishment? But I kind of laugh at the way you talk about this, and I'm kind of having a private chuckle over here because everything you're talking about, I'm laughing about how much you're surprised by it, because as someone who's spent a lifetime working in the arts in this country, I'm kind of like, nothing you're saying is abnormal. That's how things work here. Like, the American American artistic establishment, be that painting, theater, art, writing, whatever have you, is extremely choosy. They pick their favorites. Even among people they like, they pick their favorite sort of thing. And half of your career success as an artist in this country, if you want to play at that level, is literally dependent on how many people kind of like you as a person. It's a complete popularity club. Like, it's worse than a high school lunchroom. And as someone who tends to not get picked for things in the American artistic establishment, I'm kind of laughing to be kind of like, well, hell's bells. If all of us who worked sued every time that we got unjustly denied for something, the courts would be very busy, and I think American artistic output would grind to a halt, because we'd all be stuck in court and lawsuits. That yeah, it's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, but there is one cardinal difference, and this is why I'm on this journey.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right what you say. The art world can be and is as arbitrary as it wants to be. But the difference with the Smithsonian Institution is that it's a private charitable trust, and the employees, officers, and regents are bound by the strictest fiduciary duties to exercise specifically the will of the testator. In other words, James Smithson's will. You must abide in every decision. Are you increasing and diffusing knowledge among men? That is the specific guiding principle for this museum. It says it clearly in there. Other museums all over you're right, it's all arbitrary, but not the Smithsonian. That's why it's different, and that's why this has to be settled, because this is the question. The next artist who approaches the Smithsonian Institution, they have no idea where they stand legally. The law, because John Roberts is the chancellor of the Smithsonian, when my appeal went all the way up to the Smithsonian, to the Supreme Court, he recused himself. The other justices were like, "Well, we're not taking this case right now." I've had 3 appeals. I have a petition now at the U.S. Supreme Court sitting right now, an emergency petition because of what just happened when President Trump had my case listed as number 4 on his 17 reasons to fire Kim Sayed. That was a huge boost to me to say, wow, there may be vindication after all. This is remarkable. So that was a life-changing and major turn of events in the last month that has brought attention and scrutiny to this issue. And the issue for you, for your readers and your listeners, this is the core issue for the citizen, to have participatory First Amendment protective free speech rights, yes or no, at the Smithsonian Institution, because the next artist, like I said, who approaches will not know. And the laws are so messed up about this. The ruling in federal court against me that I appealed to the Supreme Court, the federal judge, a Trump appointee, and I have documents to show the courts have no idea what they're doing. He ruled that the Smithsonian Institution is the government through and through. Last week, Lonnie Bunch III, who is the Smithsonian secretary, made a statement saying the Smithsonian is independent. President Trump had no right, and the president had no authority to fire Kim Sayed. And so he rightly says, oh, no, we're independent. But in the courts, they argue, no, we're the federal government through and through. And we're so much the federal government that we exercise government speech, and the government speech that the Smithsonian exercises cancels all free speech rights of American citizens. And that's why they said, Mr. Raven, you have no free speech rights in the Smithsonian because it's the government. And yet the Smithsonian says, no, it's not the government. We're independent. And you have these 2 contradictory positions that are side by side right now, unresolved before the U.S. Supreme Court, that cannot be both true at the same time. Because if it's true, this is how nonsensical it is. You have the 7 members of the 3 branches of government sitting at the same table, the executive, the legislative, and the judicial, making decisions with members of the public as one, violating the doctrine of the separation of powers, claiming to be the government in the court and private when it's convenient. You cannot have it both ways. It's either one or the other. And that's the question that's we as the people must resolve, because that museum was given to us, we the people. It was given to the American people for the increase and diffusion of knowledge for all men, not just for those who comply politically with the politics of the day of a director. So that's my story, Cameron.
No, I appreciate it. I think it's important to I think I kind of, I kind of feel sorry for you because your work has gotten caught up in a very unique moment in American political life. And the part of me that loves our system and wants it to work the way it was intended is kind of like, oh my goodness, like this is so like good and great, and and holding institutions to accountability, and holding government to accountability, always a good thing, all this type of thing. But I've been in this game long enough to also understand the politics of the moment. And for better or for worse, anything is, you're absolutely 110% right. Like 10-10, no notes. Yep. I mean, I'm not, as I'm sure if you watch the show at all, I am not a huge fan of Trump. Um, I have spent a good deal of time on this show talking about, my difficulties with him. And it's a Monday where I'll have the news hour this evening, and I will spend a great deal of time this evening talking about all the ways in which his policies are not great, all this type of thing. So, but I'm also a bit of a free speech absolutist. And I think the great thing about it is like you're asking the system to actually work as intended, which I love anyone that does that, kind of regardless of where they're coming to it. That's always a great and wonderful thing. But I also feel bad that I think your work has gotten caught up in the politics of the moment. Um, to be honest, I think you're probably going to get your way eventually, given how things are going and all this type of thing. But I think the main difficulty is you and your work have gotten caught up in sort of a institutional, political, intergovernmental face-off between certain establishment people and establishments within government and society, and an upstart real estate developer from Queens who think he can be president. And unfortunately, when you have a big sort of moment like that, there's collateral damage. And so I love what you're doing in principle, although I'm sure politically we probably couldn't be farther apart. I love what you're doing in principle, and what you're fighting for, and holding the system to account and to have it work the way that it is supposed to. I just regret that you and your work have been caught up, as a fellow artist. I regret that you and your work have been caught up in this very difficult political moment, in a face-off between one establishment versus another. And that's a very unfortunate place to be in, I think. I think it's very difficult to continue to be creative when you're spending a lot of time in laws and court and researching and all this type of thing. And so, yeah, but on the bright side, you can't buy this type of publicity. So, um, it's a difficult thing, but I do regret that you've been caught up in this unique political moment. At probably any other time in American history, if you were an artist and had painted something and gotten this type of attention, we wouldn't be having this conversation, because your artwork would be up and I would be talking to someone else right now. It's a very sad thing that you've gotten caught up in probably one of the most divisive moments in American history since the American Civil War. Um, and
But
that's
that, but
that's
that's
most
easy.
unfortunate.
That it is, and because that's not who I am, and that's not what the painting is about either. And that's what, again, the betrayal that comes, because I was never given a chance to share, in the sense of this story at that level, which was demanded. Like I said, I am somebody who is a politically, homeless person. If you analyze my story, if you see what went on, I called Trump to resign on January the 9th, 2021, after the January 6, 2021 insurrection. I called him to resign. I called the president to repent. I called the president to turn. I didn't vote for him the third time. So I am a politically neutral person. I left the Republican Party. I stand as an individual who, I don't even know if I'm independent, but I'm certainly not involved with the stripes anymore. But that's given me the objectivity to stand here and say, this is a story. It's an American story. about American people, American citizens. It's about the rights that we've been given. It's about this opportunity that we have. You see, I celebrate it because I'm like, man, this is so amazing. I'm this little guy, I'm this nobody, and I'm able to sue the American government. I grew up in this little town on the southern coast of Spain, a little fishing port, and here I am standing here doing this work, and it's my destiny. I mean, I have no doubt about it. And so I appreciate the sentiments for me, but I rejoice in this. As hard as it's been fraught with disappointments and discouragement, depression, just like abandoning this whole thing because of it. There is a thread, a trace of grace, of destiny that's unfolding in my life that has transformed me I am so different to how I was when I entered into this, for the better and not bitter, because I learned in life that, you have a choice, as life comes to you many times in a brutal fashion, that you will and can become bitter, or you can let the fire purify you and you can become better. And so I've chosen the latter, and I have benefited immensely from it. And what I bring to the story now to your audience is that, we the people, we have a chance, as bleak as it may be politically now, as difficult as it is, and as difficult that we can perceive the media and all that's going on, we still have a responsibility right here. I said the other day to someone, I said, when people are so quick and they look at the news and they're obsessed, and it's like I switch it all off. I don't deal with it. I create. I'm in a mode. I'm writing my book. I'm writing an additional 6 chapters to my book right now. So I'm thriving in a creative space. I wasn't like that 30 or 40 days ago before this all happened. I was wondering what in the world was going on. So things change, opportunities come, and as citizens, we all have the chance. We all have the opportunity, and I say this to most programs, is because we can involve ourselves in the civic process in this country, whether it's getting something done about the potholes in your street, or whether it's writing letters, or whether it's calling up, shows and expressing yourself, or writing books, or voting, or going out to help people, volunteering, going to a soup kitchen. There are ways, multiple ways of being a person who gives life to your community, standing up for righteousness, blessing the people that need to be blessed, the poor, help. There's so many ways that in America we can participate in. And I say this in conclusion is, because we can, we must.
Yeah, it's a difficult, it's a difficult thing. Because this is, obviously going to, continue to, enable and put forward the Trump agenda. It's kind of become a talking point and everything, which is its own difficulty. But, thank you for coming on the Cameron Journal podcast. Why don't you let everybody know where we can find you online and keep up with you and your story?
Okay, my art website, which is my landscapes photography and has nothing to do with any of these issues, is julianraven.com. But then the website surrounding these issues and my book, Odious and Cerberus, is smithsoninstitution.com. Not Smithsonian Institution, that's the official one. I got the name Smithson, which is from James Smithson, the testator or founder of the Smithsonian Institution, and it's smithsoninstitution.com.
Thank you so much for coming on the Cameron Journal podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Cameron.
That's all for this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us online at CameronJournal.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I love to talk to my followers and listeners, so please feel free to get us on social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter, and we'll see you next time on the Cameron Journal podcast.